Hey everyone, welcome back. This is the Alabama Student Eagles podcast. My name is Brady Johnson.
And mine is Joe Blocker.
For this conversation today, we got Brilyn Hollyhand joining us. He is one of the leading young conservative activists in the nation and public commentators, and he has done a lot of work at both the state and national level. And he's done tremendous work getting young people involved and reaching Gen Z. So we're really excited to have him on the podcast today, and it's going to be a great discussion.
Well, I'm
So
super
thank you.
excited for this. This is the first interview I've done in a minute without people with some gray hair, and I constantly walk into rooms and be the youngest person, and this is what I do it for. This is the cool part. I was in the fourth grade when I started my podcast, and seeing people even older than me with an already bigger audience than I had when I started is super, super, super inspiring. So I'm just a fan already. I just want to acknowledge that, and I appreciate what y'all do. So thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. We're really excited to be having you on, and I think this will be great for a lot of the young people out there who will be listening
Yeah,
to this. So it'll be great to hear some fresh perspectives, I think. So we'll be reaching a big Gen Z audience today. So
awesome.
yeah,
I'm excited.
yes. All right. So I think to get it started, I wanted to ask you just to tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got involved in politics in the first place, what really got you interested, and what led to you becoming the Brilyn Hollyhand you are today.
Yeah, it started really simple. I was in the fourth grade. If you do math right, and I'm horrible at math, it was around the time of the 2016 election. And I had never paid attention to politics, hadn't made it that far in civics class, and we didn't know anything about political parties or voting or any of that structure. But thankfully, one night I was doing some spelling homework, and my parents happened to have on one of those debates between Trump and Clinton. And obviously, that was a pretty fiery race. And when I tell people that that sucked me in, they're like, oh, you were attracted to how hostile and chaotic that was. And I actually say no, like the divisiveness didn't attract me. It showed me that we needed to solve that. And we had to figure out a solution to our parents' generation just screaming at each other and having some counteraction to that. And so I thought Gen Z was the solution. I thought we were the answer. And it started just because that night the debate was on. I wasn't paying attention. I thought it's some old, boring adults talking on the screen. But there was a moment that kind of caught my attention and made me look up from my homework. And it was when Clinton made a comment to Trump that she'd be concerned with someone with the temperament of Donald Trump having nuclear codes. And Trump really quickly turned on his feet and said, because you'd be in jail. And like the audience went wild and it
Yes.
went viral on social media like instantly. And I remember looking up because think about it. I mean, the only politicians I'd ever seen were Bush and Obama. They came out with a talking point memo script, a consultant handed them as they hit the stage, and they didn't go off script. And this guy's over here just like telling the Secretary of State she's going to jail for crimes. Like, this is pretty cool. And I was like, who is this guy? But keep in mind, I didn't
Mhm.
know if he was a good guy, bad guy. I didn't know what parties even looked like. I just was interested. So I started paying attention. I vividly remember that same cycle in November going to my school library and voting in a little mock election for elementary school, and all of my friends voting based upon which color party they liked better and not based upon like the candidate. And I was like, you guys are crazy. They just like the color blue better than they like the color red. And it kind of woke me up to the fact of, hey, like young people aren't as informed as they could be. And I get that not all fourth graders need to know every detail of foreign policy, but maybe it would be a cool idea for us to maybe just teach that a little bit more. And that kind of made me start in this whole crusade of informing the next generation. That turned into what it looks like today when I started a podcast. I really wanted to have a young voice out there. I was watching some more of the news. I didn't understand everything I was seeing, but I also didn't understand it because nobody was explaining it to me in a Gen Z term. Nobody was explaining it to me and what I had learned so far. And I waited and I waited and I kept looking and there was no other voice. And I said, if the adults are going to do it, I'm going to step up and try. And I started a podcast. And the only reason I'm talking to you today is because the very first episode of that podcast, little known guy at that time, he was on his very first ever campus tour. His name was Charlie Kirk. And for
Yep.
some reason, he answered my email when I asked if he could give me 10 minutes of his time. He gave me 30 minutes. We sat down in my hometown in Tuscaloosa. He came to speak at UA as one of his first ever stops. And from that point forward, that inspiration, that motivation of coming on the podcast when my local mayor, my local city council, the dog catcher, nobody would come on this little fourth graders podcast. But Charlie gave me that chance. And getting to work with him, be inspired by him, be mentored by him the past few years is the only way this has been possible. And it's the only reason I'm still doing this. And it's been a
Yeah.
pretty cool ride.
That's awesome. Charlie Kirk was one of my heroes as well. I
Yeah.
really looked up to him. I listened to a lot of his content, and he was awesome. But I love that. I love hearing your story, and I think that's really important because you really had the attitude of seeing that there's a problem in the world, but then
Yeah.
not just accepting it, actually trying to do something to fix it. And I think that's so important. And if more people had that same attitude, we'd be in a much better place as a nation.
Absolutely. I think a big frustration at the current point, and I wrote about it a whole chapter in my first book. I sat down with a psychologist and I was like, why do people look at the world on fire and just sit and watch it burn?
Yeah.
And he was like, a lot of surveys show that our generation doesn't actually want to do any effective change. We get frustrated and we go protest. We get frustrated and we go dye our hair blue. We get frustrated
Hmm.
and we go get a nose ring. We get frustrated and we grab a bullhorn and shut down the entire campus. But are we doing anything to change legislation? Are we doing anything to speak out? Or are we just complaining that the adults aren't doing a good enough job? There's a different format where you're frustrated and you go do something effectively. And I feel like that's what I've tried to do. Yeah, I get frustrated with both sides all the time. But I could sit and whine and complain on the comfort of my couch. I could get outside. And I think a big thing that, I've spoken about a lot, even since, the assassination is how did it happen? Like, how did we get to a point where, our mentor was shot on national TV by a coward? It's because, unfortunately, in society today, we've replaced courage with comfort. It's a lot easier to sit on a rooftop and assassinate a guy than to go up to the microphone and debate him. It's a lot easier to doom scroll or rant on social media about the problems in the country than get outside, put on a bulletproof vest and go actually try to change something about it. In no way, shape, or form is this easy. I just want to go ahead and get that out there now. I want every single person in your audience to do something. That might just be registering to vote. That might be starting a club in your local high school. That might be running for office one day. That might be starting your own podcast. But I just want you to know up front, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I think Charlie's the best example. In no way, shape, or form is this easy. There are two babies that don't have a father to tuck them in the night simply because he cared so much about this country that he knew the risk and continued to go out there. Just today, I think security's called me twice with two threats just here around this campus of people that have either driven in or made a point to just want to make it known that they were around the area to try to do some threats to me. It would be so easy right now to log out of this Zoom, to put my mic down forever, to walk to class with my friends, hang out around town downtown tonight, and never have to think about politics again. But I think what's so important for young people to understand, and I said this at the top of the interview, I'm not a math guy. Like I'm not a science guy either. You could walk out of here right now, never do math again. You could walk out of here right now, never do science again. You could walk out right now, put this Zoom away, never even write an essay again. But once you graduate high school, the one thing that's always going to follow you is government. And if you decide to get involved now before it's too late, you can look at your kids one day and say, I did everything I could. I left it all on the line to save this country. And hopefully, I think we're on the right track to hand them a better America than we were handed. That's why I'm doing this. Not because it's easy,
Yeah.
but because it's hard.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's
that's
inspiring.
great.
And I definitely think you're right. Like, our generation has a big issue with thinking it's never going to happen to me when eventually it will catch up to you.
Yeah.
I've talked about this topic before, but yeah, I totally agree with everything you said. And it's time for us to step it up.
Yes. Yes, 100%. I think that courage is so important right now. I loved how you talked about that. Because a lot of people will look at all the chaos and all the confusion in the world, and they'll take that as an excuse to not get involved. They'll want to, kind of stay in their own little safe corner instead of actually going out there and making a difference. But what we're trying to do is encouraging students to take a stand. And I mean, one of the best reasons to do that is because courage is contagious. And so when one person stands up, then other people are going to get behind them and do so as well. And that's how you build a movement.
Yeah. I mean, and I think
Yeah.
that's what's so important about what we're doing right now. I mean, first of all, in Charlie's situation, it would have been a lot easier and he would have made millions more dollars and still be alive today if he sat in the comfort of his podcast studio and just screamed about the problems. He
Mhm.
wanted to go out there and make that courage contagious by, actually going to the campuses, talking to the students face to face, the ones that agree with him and especially the ones that disagreed with him. He didn't have to do that. He could have signed multi-million dollar deals to sit behind a plushy studio and a microphone and do it from the comfort of his home. He decided to go out there, and that's why I did the college tour last semester, and that's why I'm doing the high school tour this semester because I want other people to join me. It's a very lonely business with a bunch of old gray hair retirement folks in DC. I want more young people to run for office or speak out or start a podcast or just register. And I think that's what's so important. You said the excuses. That is my biggest pet peeve of this entire world. So many in our generation have, and it's not our fault. It's how we were raised in this culture today to be coddled and say that you can make excuses for everything. It's a victimhood mindset. You're told that if you put your hands out and wait patiently, the government's going to give you everything you need and you can just sustain yourself off the government. Let me just spoil that narrative for your audience right now. You cannot sustain yourself in the American dream off of the government alone. Reagan made it very clear. The scariest words in the English language are I'm from the government and I'm here to help. If you have been taught your entire childhood that you can just wait patiently, sit on your behind, and get every handout expected, that's not America. That's not how our system works. You have to earn it. You have to fight for it. That's what everybody in this country's done. That's why it stood the test of time for 250 years. And if we don't flip that narrative on its head, if our generation doesn't live countercultural, we will fall back into that mindset of we're just going to wait here and become robots to the government. And I'll close with this right now. I don't think that any person in your audience that lived through COVID, any person that experienced being a student, whether you were elementary, middle school, or high school, and the lockdowns of COVID, can say that living off of the government or the government controlling your life was a good idea. Because if you were taught in
That's right.
school that maybe you should depend on the government, you saw how bad that an idea it was in action. The same government that told you to strap a diaper to your face, that you should be locked out of school for a year and a half, that you couldn't go visit your granny for Thanksgiving dinner, but hey, the strip club down the street, that's completely fine to be open. Those are the idiocies that prove to us that, hey, government's actually insane. Government actually should work for you and you shouldn't work for them. And that mindset is what really woke us up. Like, yes, Trump was a great candidate. Yes, he had good policies in 2024. I think a lot of Gen Z getting out the ballot box this last election was thankfully because so many people were awakened, unfortunately, from the tragedy of COVID.
Yes, I 100% agree. And I love how you brought up Ronald Reagan because I agree with him when he said that government is not the solution to our problems. Government is the
Yes.
problem. And there's a really good contrast you can draw between that quote and what Zoran Mamdani said recently, where he basically, you probably know this, but he basically said that there's no problem too small for government to solve and there's no issue too big for government to solve. And that's like the exact opposite view. And what conservatives believe is that individuals should take responsibility for their own lives instead of just relying on the government. So I
Yeah,
think that's really important.
I don't know if Zoran watches this podcast much, but if he is, I just want to be really clear to him that I haven't seen an issue that the government has solved in several decades. I
Yeah.
work in it every single day. I'm around it every single day. And unfortunately, the private sector is cleaning up a lot of messes for the government because his socialist mindset, it's just failed. And I want to say this. You can sit and quote polls and stats and all that kind of stuff all day and networks that want to tell you that Gen Z's going, socialist and we buy into this idea. Yesterday, I was on a campus here at Auburn, and I was sitting in global politics class, and somebody in the back of the room raised their hand after our professor explained that he grew up in a socialist country and got to flee it, and how they've never succeeded, like not a single time. And this isn't a guy reading out of the textbook; he's telling us his childhood life story. And this guy who, of course, had colored hair, raises his hand in the back of the room and was like, "Hey, do you think the reason socialism has never worked is because America always stops it?" And the professor just kind of looked at him and he was like, we don't stop it. We have to save them. Like we always have to bail them out and offer a life raft to these people. And speaking of raft, think about it. This is the comment that I made to the student as we're walking out of the class. People build rafts out of garbage to flee countries that the government controls every aspect of their lives. Like they come to America for that freedom so that the government is not in everything they do. And he looked at me and he said, well, there's a lot of millionaires in China. You didn't point that out. And I said, well, I would rather be a millionaire in the United States, as we have a lot of them too, and read my Bible openly than be arrested or executed in China for trying to read my Bible and also being a millionaire. I would choose that every single day. As encroaching as the government's getting here, at least there's not, at this point in time, the taping of this interview, a camera on every single corner and government access in every single app that we have. We have a little bit more freedom than they do in China, and I'm fighting every day to get closer and closer away from them. So that mindset that he's been, indoctrinated by, for sure came from either his family or being obsessed with this TikTok mindset of
Mhm.
free things and emotions dangling in front of your face are always going to be the easy way out. America didn't survive 250 years by taking the easy way out. We're not going to survive another 250 years by taking the easy way out. So this mindset today of let's just crumble and all live at an equal playing field and let's just see what happens with the socialist idea. It didn't creep in the back door of New York, guys. We voted it in the front door of City Hall, and it's going to be really hard to get out once it's in there now.
Yeah, there's a lot of people right now in America who are advocating for socialism and communism, but those same people aren't willing to move to these other countries where they actually do have
Right.
socialism. Like they sit here in America and they criticize our capitalist system, but they're not willing to go to China or North Korea. If they think socialism is so great, why don't they move there?
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's really important. And another issue that you raised is kind of like the problem where a lot of people will see these clips on social media, and a lot of people will listen to these things that they hear online without doing the research for themselves. And so you're talking about that, that kid in your class who raised his hand when the professor was talking about socialism. He's probably seen a lot of these TikToks, a lot of these videos in social media. And I think he, like many other people in our generation, will watch these videos and they'll watch these short clips and they just listen to whatever they hear on TikTok or on Instagram instead of actually doing the research for themselves. And so I think one thing that's really important is for people to learn to think critically and think for themselves. So I'm curious to know, what's some of your advice there? Like, how do you think people can do their own research and come to their own conclusions instead of just buying whatever talking points they hear online?
Step one is to not buy into the lie that the public school system is trying to feed us. All across the country, modern day public schools are basically taxpayer funded obedience training, and indoctrination's running rampant. It's worse in college campuses, but it's trickled all the way down into kindergarten. I had a parent come up to me yesterday on the street and say that a kindergarten teacher set her kindergarten daughter down to tell them that the world's going to end if they don't stop driving to school in a car. Like this burden on the shoulders of a kindergartner is just taxpayer funded obedience training. It's disgusting and it's indoctrination. That's step one. Second step is to turn off your phone and not just get all your information from a social media app. Obviously my entire career revolves around being on a social media app, but I don't get my information from that social media app. I provide commentary there. In no way, shape, or form am I telling you to go get your daily news from my Instagram feed. It's just not a smart idea. What I do every single morning is listen to two different podcasts while I'm in the shower and getting ready, from both different sides of the aisle. I listened to a podcast this morning that literally was attacking me by name, but I was understanding their worldview, understanding kind of their perspective on things. And then I listened to a little bit more middle of the road podcast. This morning, I read five different news outlets, their top stories, very across the spectrum. And that's how you get your own, information, then pick your own conclusions. I think it's just a problem as much as it is on the left as it is on the right of just being in an echo chamber, of just watching Fox or just watching our more right-wing channels and not understanding one, the left's perspective, and two, just living in a bubble. And I think that's a flaw. If we sit and just talk about how bad the country is or present all these solutions in a conservative think tank bubble, it's never going to get out mainstream to maybe win over some disenfranchised Democrats or win over some independents. And I think that mindset is how, Gen Z gets informed. It's not through this traditional channel that's been taught. It's through going out. And I'm not telling you have to go pick up the morning paper physically by hand. I do. Maybe just check out some free articles on the homepage of Google. They're free, they're easy, and that's your opportunity. It takes maybe 5 minutes every morning to be a little bit more informed citizen.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. And it's important to, like you were saying, read some opinions from people who might disagree with you, because that's the
Absolutely.
best way to challenge yourself and to really challenge your arguments to become better. Because when you address people who might have different viewpoints or who believe different things, that allows
That's
you
it.
to improve your own arguments. So that's
That's a
really
good
good.
point. What I
Yeah,
just did the campus tour last semester, so we did
yeah,
we did 10 stops, and all 10 we did debates. And I mean they got hostile, and it's some people that drove several hours from faraway states to come in and press me on certain issues. And I remember walking out one time, and one of the protesters I thankfully turned in one of our debates, and he kind of saw the light a little bit. And we're walking out and heading back to campus, and he was like, "Hey, like, how are you so prepared? Like, how did you have all those stats memorized?" And I was like, well, I listened to the podcasts that attack me to see the talking points you're using against me or to see the ideas that you're pushing. And then I know what you're going to come talk about because you ranted about it for an hour this morning and I happen to listen to the podcast in the shower. Like the information's out there. You can prepare yourself, you can get ready. And maybe it didn't happen in that scenario, but maybe there was something that I got exposed to that I agreed with them on, or maybe they shared a different viewpoint. Like that's allowed too. We're not in a cult. Like you're allowed to have a range of viewpoint of ideas. And I think listening to them instead of tuning them out, there's so many people in this business who are like, oh, I don't listen to the haters. I don't give any time to the people. No, like you're allowed to listen to both sides. Like I don't sit and read my Instagram comments, but like it's okay for me to listen to some of the commentary about me or against me because that's how I can form my opinions and say, one, should I course correct? Two, if they're just crazy, how do I respond to the crazy? And that's the
right.
key to success here.
Yeah, that's awesome. I believe that conservatives know the left's viewpoints better than the left knows our arguments.
Oh yes.
Yes, and
Hmm.
yeah, one of the ways you know you're ready to debate someone is when you know what they're going to say, when you know their arguments better than they know their own arguments.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's definitely true, and it also kind of exemplifies the importance of understanding both sides and educating yourself, because that's one of the main issues with socialism today. That we talked about this on our socialism and communism podcast, is that one of the main issues why we see so much of this leftist agenda and socialist propaganda almost spreading throughout the US is that people haven't educated themselves. They don't know right from wrong. So when they hear something like socialism, which seems so glamorous on the outside, and they don't realize that it's really dangerous, they're going to fall into that trap so easily.
Yes. All right. So, since we brought up the issue of social media and technology, I know one of the major issues that is really getting the attention of Gen Z right now is AI. And that's one of those major advancements in technology that we've seen, obviously, in recent years. And there's a lot of questions surrounding the issue, and there's a lot of different viewpoints out there. So, Brylan, I just thought it'd be good to get your viewpoint on AI. What do you think about it? Should we be rushing forward to accept this new technology? Should we be pausing maybe and taking a break right now from AI? What are some of your thoughts on it?
I think cautiously optimistic is the good mindset. I think it shouldn't replace God in our lives, but it's definitely something that's going to be a tool regardless if we love it or hate it. You can stop it for a few years and slow roll it, but it's out and it's going to continue to grow. So what do you do about that? Do you ban it in schools? Do you pretend it doesn't exist? Or instead of what's going on right now, should teachers start teaching how to correctly use it and how to use it in our lives? It's banned in all of my college classes. But in a lot of the workforce today, it's being used as a required assistant in the office and something that like genuinely can help your daily life. I'm not saying cheating, I mean like helping you keep up with what you need to be doing. And so if we had some classes, teaching that instead of teaching gender pronouns, I think we'd have a more successful society. I think if we actually took the time to embrace it as opposed to just completely block it and pretend it doesn't exist, it's here, it exists, it's readily available and freely accessible to every American. And so it's something that you can't make an excuse for of, oh, let's wait a few years, let's get some more information. Sure, I'm not saying to like completely replace it with every aspect of your life. There still need to be humans, and I don't think that AI is going to get to a point where it can fully replace humans. Thankfully, we're uniquely and wonderfully made by God, and we still have an opportunity and advantage that they don't have. But I think education on the issue and on how it's evolving literally every single day would be a healthy way for schools to redeem themselves, that they are not just some of those taxpayer funded indoctrination camps.
Yeah, I actually really agree with that. I think that just like any other time where you see advancements in technology and
Yeah.
civilization, it allows you to either use it for greater good or for greater evil. And so the key is to be prudent with how you use it and to use it for productive and good purposes
Yeah.
instead of just allowing it to take over your life. And that's the same thing with social media. You can use social media to get out your message to more and more people, or you can use it to just doom scroll instead of having real interactions with others. So the key is how you use it and whether or not you're using the technology instead of allowing the technology to use you. So that's
Good
really the
point.
key. Yes. All right. So I want to slightly change topics now. I remember when you were talking about why you first got involved in politics, it was because you were watching the Trump debate with Hillary Clinton. And there was that moment when Trump turned to Hillary and said, it's because you should be in jail, which I remember watching that clip. And I thought that was really good. And it speaks to something about Trump, which is that one of the best things about him and one of the reasons why he's done so well with young voters is because he comes across as genuine and real, whereas a lot of politicians don't come across that way, and a lot of politicians seem very fake. But Trump, I think, despite his flaws, which there are some, I think that Trump is really genuine and he really cares and he says things the way he sees them, which I think is a virtue that a lot of politicians don't have. But I'm curious, since there are so many people who are very much against Trump, and we see Trump derangement syndrome on the left in full swing right now, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on Trump's administration so far? If you just had to give a quick recap or, yeah, just what the positives, the negatives, what's your view? How do you think that Trump has done in his first 2 years of this second administration?
Yeah, to your point about, how he relates to people, I mean, how do you make a New York billionaire authentic? And how do you make him seem like the common man? Well, he worked for it and he earned it. He went on the podcast, he walked on college campuses, we went to the college football games together. He made the TikToks, like he made the point to be accessible and on your For You page, and therefore he earned Gen Z's vote, and that's how he got in office. And I would give it an A so far. I definitely think that if you list out the laundry list of accomplishments that he quoted at every single campaign stop that we went to together, he's marked off a considerable amount of those. The only reason I'm not saying A plus is because Congress. Congress that we also elected last November, unfortunately, has left majority of the accomplishments to executive orders that Trump's, willingly signed. But I just want to be like really frank with your audience. Let's say we lose in 2028. I'm working my butt off and sleeping an hour every night to make sure that that doesn't happen. But let's say that we lose. The day that Gavin Newsom or Kamala Harris or Josh Shapiro or Lord forbid Tim Walz or somebody gets in office, with one stroke of a pen, they can completely overturn 4 years of accomplishment. And you don't believe me? On day one, was Trump's first executive order? Overturning Biden's executive orders. If we could do it, they can do it. How you prevent that is codifying these executive orders into law. So a lot of the great accomplishments that Trump's been able to do so far through executive orders are great. They're temporary. If Congress gets off their lazy butt, if they get off of a taxpayer funded vacation and they like do the job that the American people voted them in to do and actually codify the agenda that not only like a few red popular states voted for, every single swing state voted for, I think we'd have more accomplishments. They've done the big beautiful bill, wonderful. It shouldn't end there though. I think they got one big thing accomplished and they've all been home since then. They need to lock in. They need to get tax, some more tax relief to Americans. They need to get some more accomplishments passed before the midterms. Let's hope that we have Congress after November, but let's act today like we're not going to have it, so that we get everything done. And we sit in November and go, well, what else can we get done with this extra free time? Because I think that's when government starts working for the people instead of against the people.
Yes, I think a lot of people get so focused on some of the problems that we're facing right now, which of course, no administration is going to be perfect and
Sure.
no president is going to be able to solve all of the problems. But people get so focused on those problems that they see in the world around them that they take for granted the fact that we actually have a leader in the White House instead of having, a passive president who basically couldn't do anything and had to rely on his team and I guess rely on the auto pen to sign bills and
Mhm.
executive orders. People take for granted the fact that we now have a real leader in the White House who's getting things done and actually representing our country on the global stage, which is
What a
something
crazy
that,
concept. We have a
yes,
president that's like actually doing his job, like he's keeping his
Mhm.
campaign promises. A
yeah,
politician that keeps their word. What is that? I haven't seen that in a
I
long
know,
time.
yeah,
Sad how surprising that is.
yes, and
Well, that's all really good. I was hoping to change the subject a little bit. I wanted to ask you about what you think about this widespread revival we're seeing among the Gen Z generation, because we were talking about that a little bit earlier. It's really interesting to see how many people our age are coming to Christ. I heard a statistic online that said that more Gen Z goes to church more than their parents did. I just wanted to ask you what you think about that.
It's beautiful and it's absolutely true, and it's a solution to the decrepit, disgusting society that we see today. Living countercultural is the answer to that. Understanding that, you can fill the God-shaped hole in your heart with all of these worldly desires and pleasures, and it's just never going to sustain you until you realize that that God-shaped hole maybe should be replaced with God. And I'll remember it was the weekend after the assassination. I was on the way to a vigil for Charlie. And I think it was my first time leaving my apartment, and we're walking with security, and it's like an odd concept. This is the first time, and I'm like emotional. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to say at this vigil, and I get a call from my college pastor. And he's like, "Hey, do you have a minute?" And I was like, "Yeah, like I have, like 45 seconds till I walk on stage. What's up?" And he was like, "I just want to let you know, like we were going to close up the church today and head home, and this young college girl knocked on the door, and we let her in, and we were talking, and she said that she was the biggest Charlie Kirk fan, watched all of his podcasts, went to all of his, some of his events, and she realized that in the wake of the assassination, none of us were talking about Charlie's relationship with Donald Trump. We were all talking about Charlie's relationship with Jesus Christ." And that girl got saved and baptized in our church parking lots. And like that's just the
Wow.
coolest picture of what we've seen out of this tragedy. I remember like I didn't sleep for the like first 2 or 3 days after the assassination because I just couldn't understand why and like couldn't figure out like God's a good God and there's always a plan, but why did it have to be Charlie and why did it have to happen this way? Like, you know, and
Mhm.
so I remember that being the first moment of like I'm never going to understand the plan, and I'm never, if I got the choice, would choose to go down this path of not having Charlie as a friend to, call on. But if, at least one I know of, but I think thousands across the country of, members of heaven are going to be up there and we're going to make it crowded when we get there. It's just a pretty cool thing. I think here on my campus at Auburn, we've seen a genuine revival of churches spilling out into the streets and new service having to be created and all that. And I think that's super cool. I thought it was kind of just kept in the South until a few weeks ago. I was up north giving a keynote one afternoon and we're driving from the airport. And we passed this building. It's beautiful, and it's got this huge white tent outside, like they're doing a county fair. And I was like, "Hey, what's that?" And he was like, "That's the overflow college service." He said that the
Oh,
service is so full inside that they had to rent like a carnival tent outside to pack all the kids, and there's still people almost standing in the road. And this is up
Wow.
north. And I was like, this is such a cool picture of a tragedy being used for good. What Satan meant for evil, the Lord's now using for good. And again, I wouldn't choose it again. I think there are other ways it could have happened, but this is the Lord's plan, and He has a plan, and it's the best plan. And I think that just gonna have to roll the punches of realizing you could sit and, fall on the floor and cry. Or you could get up and say, we're going to try to bring people to Christ because that's what Charlie lives and died doing. And that's why I've been so passionate about this. I lose a lot of money and opportunities and deals and gigs when I quote scripture. And from a business point of view, I've been advised, tone that down a little bit. Actually, I'm going to tone it up every
Mhm.
time that somebody intimidates me for it because I just think that's the most important part. Like, yes, I hope your audience, exits out of this podcast and go vote. And I hope that they vote Republican, and I hope that we see them at the ballot box. At the end of the day, I just want to see them in heaven. And I want to see that as a number gained, for Christ. And so, yeah, like join the Republican role here in the state, but also like join the heavenly role, because I think that's the most important thing we can fight for. Politics is temporary, faith is eternal, and these trivial issues we're talking about all go back to spiritual warfare.
Mhm.
Like, yes, we're fighting immigration at the moment, or abortion, or LGBTQ, or whatever other topics are going to come up in my day today. It all goes back to faith. And
Yeah.
so, I think when they told us that we're supposed to feel guilt for having faith in politics, that everything started to crumble because we took God out of schools. And we took God out of work, and we took God out of the dinner table, and we said that's not culturally accepted. And the day that we put that back, which Charlie, was using his dying breath to do, I think we see America turn around.
Mhm.
yeah. I definitely think that's a big reason why we see such a big revival right now. It's just because being on the left is just such a dismal way to live. And so whenever you finally, start to come back, you realize being on the right, being conservative is just happier. You're just a happier person whenever you're conservative. And being conservative, we have a lot of Christian values. So it's kind of hard to be conservative and not find God.
Speaking
Yes.
of happier, I was at the gym yesterday and I was walking in and some older gentleman was like, "Well, why are you so happy?" And it's freezing cold and I like he watched a protester scream at me as I was walking in, and he was like, "Where? Well,
Oh,
you're giddy. Like, why are you so happy?" And I was like, "What is there not to be happy about? Like, Jesus is good. He put breath in our lungs, and I get to fight for the right movement and like have fun doing it." And like that, like we're happy warriors. Like that's like inherently like just like our
yeah.
attitude. So like people can throw stuff on me or scream at me or protest or riot or whatever they're going to do. They can kill my friend. We're not going to stop, and we're not going to sit down and cry and not be happy. Like at the end of the day, there is still so much to be grateful and thankful for. At the end of the day, like I am going to be a happy warrior, and that's just going to continue to happen.
Yeah, I
Yes.
love that. And the
That's
Bible
awesome.
even says that blessed are those who are persecuted for
Yeah,
him.
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's great. I loved how you talked about the intersection between faith and politics because I think that a lot of these issues are directly related. And, people say the Bible doesn't have anything to do with politics and you should keep faith and politics separate. I couldn't disagree with that more. I think that is so foolish to take that position because if you look at all of these major cultural and societal issues that we're talking about right now, they are all fundamentally moral issues. And the Bible has a lot to say about morality. The Bible speaks directly to some of the major cultural issues that are going on right now. So it's important not to think that politics and faith is somehow separate, but instead it's important to remember that God cares about society and God cares about government, and He wants us to do our part to make a difference.
absolutely. And I think this mindset that like we're supposed to feel guilt for being a Christian nation, that was just a lie that we were taught. No, like America was legitimately founded on religious persecution and trying to flee that and come here to form a Christian nation. And the whole idea of the First Amendment is that you can practice your religion freely, and I'm an absolutist of that. I'll absolutely defend your right to do that. But unfortunately, like every single day we get closer and closer to China, where not only is it like culturally frowned upon to be a Christian, but they're like, oh, you shouldn't combine faith and politics like at all. And like that's actually the entire idea that our founders, intended. And it's the entire idea that our like Constitution and Declaration of Independence are written on top of. And so I think like this modern day idea, like if you just look back at the last what decade and a half, when we took God out of schools, America started to suffer, and it's crumbled since then. And it's because we're not raising strong Christian men and women to go out into, every single day. And I think that when you get back to that mindset of you're not a victim, you're actually, a child of God, and you should be grateful for that every day that you wake up with breath in your lungs. I think it's a different mindset that you go in grateful for the freedoms of America and grateful for the cold weather or the rain because
Mhm.
you still get to experience life in the greatest country on the planet. And what I tell people when I do the tour is like really simple. You already hit the jackpot. Like you won the lottery. Now it's what are you going to do with that? Are you going to live in the free United States of America with every single opportunity you could possibly imagine at the reach of your fingertips, or are you just going to sit and complain about it? Because I don't know about you. I can't think of a single other country in the entire planet that a fourth grader with a dream and seven followers could sit before you today with a best-selling book that worked in a presidential campaign that gets to tour campuses. Like, no, I didn't know that myself. It was all God. There was no statistical way that I should have succeeded or even survived in this business. It's only God. And so every single day that I can turn this back to Him, I'm going to keep doing it. I don't care how many followers I lose, how much money I lose. We're going to keep doing it because that's the whole point of this.
Yes, I love that. And one of the keys to happiness is gratitude. And we who live in
Yep,
America have a lot to be grateful for. And so,
absolutely.
and so it's so important not to take these opportunities and these blessings that God has given us for granted. So I
Yeah.
think that's great. All right. So in closing now, Brylan, I want to ask you one last question. We talked a lot about the importance of young people getting involved. And I think there's a lot of young conservatives out there who care about these issues and who want to start making a difference, but maybe they just don't know how to take that first step. And that's really what's important is to give them that first step so they can get involved. So what's some advice or what's some tips you might have for young people out there who want to get involved, but they don't know where to start?
Yeah, you start at stop believing the lie that if you're young, you should sit down and shut up and wait your turn. That's actually the furthest thing from the truth. My life verse is 1 Timothy 4:12. I wear it on a blue bracelet on my wrist every single day. It was the epigraph of my book. I quote it in every speech I've ever given. It's really simple. Don't let anyone look down on you because you're young, but set an example for the believers in speech and love and conduct and faith and in purity. That's what our mantra is. That's our marching orders from Jesus. It's not a suggestion. It's what we're commanded to do. And so I think every single day that we buy into this lie that we're voiceless and powerless, we go right into Satan's narrative. But every single day that you step out and you be bold and you have courage, like Charlie lived and like Jesus inspired us to do, you have that opportunity. And so I'm not saying you have to go, start a podcast or run for office. I hope you do that. I want to see you in DC one day. But like maybe it's something simple. Think of, our ages on this podcast right now. Alexander Hamilton, James Monroe, Aaron Burr, they were all around our age when they signed the Declaration of Independence and joined the Continental Army. I'm not asking you to go join the army. I'm not asking you to go found your own country. I'm simply asking you to register to vote, to pay a little bit more attention than the average Gen Zer is, to maybe have a tense conversation at your lunch table, because this tense conversation that you've been taught is taboo is actually just something called civil discourse. Maybe you speak up in your class. Maybe you don't center yourself in an essay. Maybe you have a conversation at the dinner table with your family that you've been shunned from having because if you can't have one in your own living room, you're certainly not going to have one in the classroom. I think this whole idea that politics or faith is taboo in private and in public is why we got here. Why we assassinate people when we disagree. Why we scream in somebody's face when we disagree. Why we throw things on them in a restaurant when we disagree. Listen, if you have a conversation with somebody at the lunch table tomorrow and you walk away from that lunch table disagreeing, so be it. At least you didn't shoot somebody. At least you didn't scream in somebody's face. That's better than what our parents or grandparents are doing. So if we get back to that society, if we do something really simple called making America talk again, that's how we revive culture. That's how we revive society. That's how we hand a better America to our children or grandchildren one day. And they ask, how do we do it? The simplest way possible. Not through legislation, not through public office, by talking. Why did we skip square one and go to every other option? We went to activism, but we skipped talking. So let's stop the riots, let's stop the protests. Let's just talk to each other.
Yes, it all starts with having those conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah. And definitely a big part of it is being courageous. And like we were talking about earlier, not letting the disagreeers kind of get to you. Like don't have that mindset that's like nobody likes me because everyone disagrees with me. As long as you're strong in what you believe and you know that what you are saying is true, then you can find happiness in that, and you don't have to find happiness in the opinions of others as long as you are, spreading the truth.
Yes, yes. All right. So, Brylan, I just wanted to say we actually had a Bible verse prepared for the end of this podcast, but you already stole it. You stole the thunder. It was the one that you mentioned in First Timothy. So
Yeah.
I think that is a really good verse that's relevant to all the things that we're talking about today about why you
Yeah.
shouldn't let anybody look down on you for your youth.
And
So
can
I'd
And
love, yes. So we were on the same page there.
I nerd out for just a second on some
yes,
theology that I've been
please.
studying? Okay, so I was looking literally yesterday at lunch with my pastor, and I was like, I'm obsessed with this First Timothy verse. I quote it every day. Can you like give me some like historical context? Because I'm a history nerd. I told you I'm not good at math and science. So
Mhm.
this was right after Saul made the conversion to Paul and was giving a sermon to the church, a letter. And he's urging the young men and women in the church to get off the sidelines and speak out, to in their time plant seeds of the gospel in the time where it wasn't culturally accepted, just like today. Just a little bit later in his life, he was killed by King Nero. He was beheaded. So if he didn't leave that message to tell the younger people to speak out, we might not have the gospel today. It might not have reached civilization today, thousands and thousands of years later. So that verse is probably the reason that thankfully generations upon generations pass it down for us to believe this, saving grace that is Jesus Christ's gospel. Thankfully that they did that, and it's up to us today. Are we going to keep doing that? Are we going to have the solution to all the world's problems? Are we going to have the antidote to the cancer of our society, which is sin, and just sit on it and talk about it in the pews of our church? Are we going to run out and scream it from the rooftops and be the hands and feet of Jesus? And when I say First Timothy 4:12, I mean the verses I say and the context I just shared because that's the most important part.
That is the most important part. Yes.
Cool.
All right.
I love history too. I love that.
Yes, yeah, I could talk all day about history. And there's so many powerful stories like that that I think really are
Absolutely.
inspiring. Yeah, so many different
And they're important to
courageous,
know.
yeah, so many different courageous individuals throughout history who are willing to stand for truth and stand up for what they believe in. And that's what our time calls for right now. I think it's important for people to remember that someday they're going to be writing history books about our time. And they're going to be writing about what we did. Did we take advantage of the opportunities that we have right now? Or did we just decide to sit back and not do anything and not get involved? So I think it's incumbent on all of us to do our part. Yes.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Brylan. I think this was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. We covered a lot of different topics, but I think we had a really great discussion.
Thank y'all for
Yes.
having
And
me. This is super fun. Y'all are awesome. Please keep up the great work. And I'm so glad y'all are doing this.
All right.
thank
Thank you
you.
so much, Brylan. Yes, it was great talking to you.
Appreciate it.